Welcome to the Creative Chats Podcast with Mike Brennan. Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Creative Chats. It's the podcast for artists, makers, and content creators where we talk about creativity, the creative process, and story. I'm your host, Mike Brennan. You can check out my work over on my website, which is mikebrennan.me. And while you're over there, I highly encourage you to check out the resources that I've created with you in mind. See, as a creative person, I know what it's like to struggle with consistency, showing up for your craft and your creativity, finding the time, right? You don't find it, you make it, by the way. And all these things that go into us trying to have a creative life. And maybe you're trying to have a creative life that reaches beyond a hobby or personal interest, but into business. And so I know what it's like to try to do that as well. And so all these things that I've created, these resources like the Daily Creative Habit Journal, which is a 90-day self-guided journal that allows you to track and measure what your creative projects are. So you know that you're showing up, you can see that you're taking action and be encouraged, or see that you're not taking action and pause and ask yourself why, like what's happening? How come I'm not showing up and doing what I've said I wanted to do and actually need to do? There are other resources such as, this podcast, and then also some creative coaching. If you feel the need for someone to come alongside you and hold you accountable, or perhaps in a group setting, I have those available for you as well over on dailycreativehabit.com or mikebrennan.me. And I would love to have you as part of our community. And thanks for watching and listening today. Now, for today's episode, I have a guest, Shelly Waldman, and Shelly is just an amazing powerhouse of a person. You'll see this in our conversation today. Photography is her love and background, but also she talks about how she worked in finance. She talks about how she moved around several different places, and how, sometimes you need to reinvent yourself. Sometimes you need to figure out, what does this season look like as opposed to a season I just moved through. And all of that really having keys with networking and relationships, getting out there, talking to people, building those relationships. And even in a casual way, if you're not sure, maybe if there's even opportunity around you, it's really by meeting people. It's by being just a good person who is listening, engaged in conversation, who shows up beyond just your own little creative cave. And so we talk about those things and a whole lot more on today's episode. So highly encourage you to check out Shelly's work. And also she has a podcast as well, mentioned at the end of this episode. So be sure to tune into that and let her know that I sent you there. So without further ado, here is my creative chat with Shelly Waldman. Well, Shelly, welcome to the Creative Chats podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mike, for having me.
Yes, I'm excited to talk to you today because I know that from the previous time we've talked, there's just a lot of ground we can cover that I think is be helpful for the people who are listening right now, just in terms of following the creative path and this kind of ever evolving, sometimes slippery type of existence that we live, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So, and also being somebody who is kind of multi-creative, I love that when I get to talk to people who are in that category, because when you have one thing and that's all you do, those people tend to be a little bit more focused and a little bit more, they're kind of wired differently. And when you have people who have multiple interests, balancing those things and moving in and out of those things, depending upon what season and how those things may change, there's no real roadmap for that. And even when you talk to another person who's done things like that, it can look completely different. And so sometimes comparing notes is helpful, just to see that you can have a context for your own thing to go, okay, now I can contextualize what I'm hearing, somebody else's journey. So all that to say, thank you for being here. I'm excited about this conversation. And I know we're going to go a lot of places, and I'm excited about it. But I want to start with this place, which is, what was the first memory that you have that's tied to creativity? Like maybe it was something as a kid, or maybe there's a specific project or something. Is there anything that comes to mind?
100%. So my mom was an art teacher. And so art and doing things creatively was embedded in my childhood. I mean, we were out collecting leaves, doing leaf rubbings. We were, my cousin and I, who lived a block apart, we were always crafting something with a hot glue gun. His mom, my aunt, my mom's twin sister, who also only lived a block away, she was a sculptor. So there was always clay around for us to play with and make animals with. So there's lots of memories as a kid of crafting all different types of things. So whether it was sewing with my grandmother or cooking in the kitchen or doing glass etching or making enamel or painting, drawing, photography, there was an array of things as a kid.
Nice. And that's probably gave you a good foundation to go give yourself permission to explore, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I went exploring into the tub of plaster Paris as a kid. With my cousin Aaron, the same cousin from before. We found a bunch of spray paint and a tub of plaster Paris, which we didn't know what it was. And we started throwing the plaster at each other. And so we were kind of covered in it. And then we went and ran through the sprinklers in the backyard while spray painting the trees in the backyard. That is a very vivid memory of being thrown into the bathtub and literally washed down because, the plaster would have set.
Yes. Nah, that's not a good situation. So as time goes on, are you continually taking advantage of creative opportunities? Like, what does that look like for you as kind of you go through school and then start thinking about like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, what is this going to look like?
Well, funny enough, I never really thought about art as a career. Even early on, I did a lot of it for fun. I think I was about 14. Let's see, I was, maybe even a little bit younger. At our temple, my mom used to put on this big art fair. And so I was one of the teachers that would help put on one of the art projects in one of the classrooms. And then after my bat mitzvah, so I must have been about 15, 16, I became the art teacher at Sunday school. And so every Sunday for about 2.5 years, I taught art to different grade levels. And so that was really fun. And then I had a camera when I was in high school. I think starting my sophomore year, I really started bringing my camera like everywhere on campus to all the different sporting activities. I played both like community soccer with AYSO, and then I played competitive volleyball in high school. So I was photographing my teams. I was photographing all the student body activities I was in. When I was a senior in high school, I was on city council. So I was a voting member of city council as a youth and helped open the Teen Activity Center in Claremont. And so there was all kinds of activities around that I was photographing. So I got really into photography and documenting. When I went off to college, I switched from being into stills into motion. My dad had a video camera, one of those old school ones that had like the video pack that you would have to wear with the VHS holder and the big thing on the shoulder. So I got like one of the very first like handheld like camcorders. I loved that thing. I wore it out, and then I got another little Sony mini tape one, and I took that to college and would videotape like my friends. Very Reality Bites for those that remember Reality Bites, how she would video her friends. So I wanted to do that all through college, and I did. And that was a very fun creative outlet while I studied economics. I was an economics major at UC Santa Barbara. I studied sport management as my minor. And my goal and dream growing up actually was to work in pro sport. So I pursued that very heavily when I was in school and started working in pro sports even before I graduated from college. I worked for the Lakers and the LA Galaxy. So from a creative endeavor, from a business standpoint, didn't happen until many, many years later.
Taking these interests that you have and kind of combining some of the things and trying to figure out, okay, what does this look like for me in this particular season? How does that then lead you to some of the things that you're doing now? Like connect some of the dots of like, well, what it is you're doing and then kind of how you've moved into some of those spaces.
So one of the big pivot points is I met my husband in school. We moved in 2008 for him to work on a film. He does production finance work. So another numbers guy. We met in corporate economics at Santa Barbara, and we moved to Vancouver, Canada. And when we moved, I was working for a bank at the time, and I had worked really hard to try to move my job with me, and only to find out like 3 weeks after we moved that, oops, there's like these laws with the United States and Canada that bar people from just having a job there. So I got let go, and then I didn't have a visa to work or go to school. So I could be in the country, but I really couldn't do anything. And it was actually kind of a golden opportunity to be like, well, I really enjoy photography. Maybe I start a blog. And because my family was like, well, what's it like living in Canada? And so I started taking pictures. I started blogging. We were taking a cruise to Alaska that year, and I decided that was like a good enough reason to go buy a new DSLR, right? And the Canon 40D had just come out, and I went down to the camera store and I don't know, probably spent like way too many hours talking to the guy behind the counter about what camera to buy, but bought it, then went down to the beach and sat and ran the manual and ended up meeting this other photographer. And we became buddies and would go on like photo walks around town. And I found like a community class that I could take around natural light photography. And then I always enjoyed Photoshop. I used Photoshop in my previous jobs. When I worked in university, I had to make flyers, and at the Galaxy, I had to like paste up press releases and things like that. And so I was like, oh, I should go take a Photoshop class. So I ended up taking a Photoshop class, and that was really cool. I mean, I think it was like Photoshop 3 or 4 at the time. That was that year that we were there for that film really allowed me to kind of get my hands and feet really in the mud, if you will, of getting back to that creativity and really just enjoying it for pure fun, getting back into creative writing, which I always enjoyed. And so when my husband's film imploded and we had to come back to the States, I was like, no, I mean, I don't want to stop doing this. This is really fun. And then that's when it was really like, how do I do this? How do I actually hang the shingle, if you will, right? How do I open the door to a business? So I found Professional Photographers of America, PPA, and they run an intense 2.5-day business of photography class. And they're really focused on like family photography, portrait photography, wedding photography. And I went to their big convention, and the workshop happens 2 days before the convention. And I took the class and I was like, well, I know numbers. I mean, I have an economics background, a business degree. I understand spreadsheets. So I just really wanted to get some understanding of like, what should my benchmarks be? What are the things I should think about? How are photographers marketing themselves? I mean, that's something I don't know anything about. And so I took that class and was like, oh, I could do this. And I came back to Northern California, walked into City Hall and filled out an application for my business. My boss at the old bank that I worked at called me and was like, hey, you want to come back and be a contractor? And I said, contractor means I can set my own hours and I don't have to abide by the dress code. So I'm in. So I went back to the bank and opened my business part-time. So I worked for the bank 3 days a week, and then I ran my business the 4 days a week. And at that same PPA convention, I met this woman who was living in my neighborhood. I was in Richmond, California, so near Berkeley, and she was on the other side of the hills in Walnut Creek, and she wanted to open a studio. And she too wanted to shoot high school seniors and teenagers and families, and so did I, but I wanted to shoot more lifestyle and she wanted to shoot more like fashion studio. So we combined our efforts together so people could have like the best of both worlds. And she opened the studio. I put in sweat equity. She put in the money. And that's kind of how it all started.
Nice. Nice. I love that there's this openness that you though had, because a lot of people would see circumstances and go like, oh, well, this has completely derailed me, or this is just, something that I didn't plan for, so I don't know what to do. But it seems to me that at each turn you were at least open enough to go, okay, let me take the right next step and let me figure out what I need to do for here in the middle of this context. And I think that's a very useful skill for anybody to have, but especially creatives and creative entrepreneurs, because there's so many things that come at you at any given time that you're just like, I don't have a box for that. I don't really know what to do with it. I need to be adaptable and creative in my approach, not just my craft, but also in how I'm setting things up as a business, or how I'm taking advantage of opportunities or trying to make opportunities if I don't see opportunities, right? Like, I mean, has that been your experience pretty much the whole journey so far?
I'd like to say yes. I think one of the to echo your point, I think being nimble is something that you really have to lean into, and I think as a creative, we need to be solution oriented, especially when we're running a business, because you're trying to figure out the solution for your client, whatever that medium is, right? And you're trying to figure out the best way to get there. And there's can be a lot of messy middle. And so I think in the early days, like, it was kind of a blessing I didn't know certain things. I think being ignorant in certain areas actually is super beneficial, because you don't know what you don't know. And therefore, when you kind of stumble into the wall that you didn't know was there, you're like, oh, I have to learn about this now. Okay. And if you're open to learning about it and you're open to being like, I didn't know about that, or gee, I can incorporate that. You're kind of like I just remember vividly being like a sponge. My first like 2 to 5 years, the first 2 years, definitely, it was like I took every class, I went to every seminar, I found all the meetup groups. I was literally would be like, oh, you've been in the business for 7 years. Like, well, what's working for you? Or what should I know about? Or what's something I, may not like pay attention to? And like, someone's like, do you have equipment insurance? I'm like, I need what? What's that? Oh yeah, I need equipment insurance. Okay. Or even just to kind of like figure out what type of photography I liked. I think most people are exposed to maybe family photography, or wedding photography is usually the first one that people will say. And I remember coming back from that PPA convention and sitting down and just looking up photographers. Back then it was like, I think I opened the Knot magazine, or I went to the knot.com and just started looking at photographers in Northern California and being like, do I like their work? And if I like their work, I sent them an email. And I must have sent about, I don't know, 15 or 20 photographers emails saying like, I really love your work. I'm thinking about getting into this. Can I come shadow you, or be a second, or be a third? I really have no idea what I'm doing. So, I just want to absorb. And I think about 25% of the people wrote me back, either giving me advice or pointing me to a resource. And 2 people invited me to come shadow them or work with them. And that's how I kind of started quickly learning. I mean, that's when like, the line chart literally went like from flat to, 90 degrees north. And I worked with this one photographer, and there was some really great things I learned from her, and there were some really awful experiences that happened at the same time. But one of the things I learned quickly by being on that job was I need to learn how to use light. I need to get a flash, and I need to learn how to shoot with it, because the minute the sun goes down at a wedding, you're out of luck, right? There's no light. You can only shoot so much ISO until everything turns to little pebbles on your screen. And that was a really quick learning of like, oh, I need better glass, because I need to be able to get my aperture, as wide open as possible. And I need to be able to shoot with light. And so really early on, within my first year of shooting, I learned how to shoot with flash, and I invested in glass and like better camera equipment.
Hmm. So in this exploration of things, right? Like you're learning, you're absorbing, you're growing. At what point do you feel like, you start getting a sense of, okay, here's what I really love, like the context for me. This is what I love to do. Like you said, the when you kind of dial in, this is stylistically what it looks like for me. This is categorically what it looks like for me. You have to put the work in, obviously, to do that, because you need some data points, right? You need to know, like, I'm trying things. Does this resonate with me? Does it not? Right. So at what point does it kind of lock in for you to go, okay, well, maybe it's not this, but it's this?
I think I'm still figuring that out. And I started this back in 2009. For context, for those that are listening, it's been a while. But I think early on I figured out I'm not like the Ann Gettys. I'm not going to shoot those cute little babies in the basket that are all like curled up. That is not my vibe. I'm way more of a editorial lifestyle photographer. As much as I love studio work and I can shoot studio work, I'm not like, I don't know, I went through this phase where I was like, I'm not a studio shooter. I like to shoot outside. I really love telling the whole story of people like doing their craft. I'm very editorial. So for a while, like that's really what I wanted to shoot. And by shooting weddings, I really got a taste of everything. You get to shoot fashion, you get to shoot product, you get to shoot food. You have to be in the moment, you have to be fast, and you can't miss it. So through that experience, I was like, I love the problem solving at a wedding, because as much as you plan and you're like, oh yeah, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to put the lights here and here, and this is how we're going to light the first dance. And then you get there and then everything falls apart. And then you're like, okay, I'm just going to be a human light stand. And, the main lead will just shoot. I quickly learned that although I did lead weddings, I just didn't enjoy that. I actually preferred to be a second lead. And photograph the guys typically over the girls. I can talk sports, and I prefer, when they're drinking whiskey over champagne, I'd rather have the whiskey. So I ended up over there. And then that really led me to think about like, well, what is it that I like at the weddings? What is it that I resonate with at the weddings? And I liked photographing families and those family moments and the family portraiture. And I was really good at that. And I could shoot family stuff, but I could also shoot them like interacting with each other in those really sweet in between moments. And so I leaned into family photography and the teenage experience. And then I shot a lot of bar and bat mitzvahs. So being Jewish, like, really lent itself to opening that door because I understand what the ritual is about. I also love shooting that teenage range. So that was really special. And I got to do the family stuff, which was really cool. So I did that for many years. And then I had a really horrible, no good client that was a couple years in, who I just wanted to sell all my equipment. And I never wanted to take another photo again. And I was going to go back into finance or be a certified financial planner, which I was going back to school for. And my husband was like, don't jump off the cliff. You know, there's one horrible, yes, truly horrible experience, but like, don't cash in and quit. And so through that, I met this woman through a wedding photography friend. I met her neighbor, actually, who was a commercial photographer. And I had no idea what commercial photography was. I met her on a hike. We got chatting. I was telling her I really like photographing kids, like kids and teens. It's really my thing. And she's like, well, can I come see your work? Sure, come on over. Here you go. Here's all the galleries. You know, here's like I think at that point I was 5 or 6 years in, and she sat down and she started going through my archive of stuff. And she's like, you're sitting on a gold mine here. And I was like, what? And she said, I'm going to help you put a book together. You're going to go to these portfolio reviews in Palm Springs and you're going to present your book. And it was like she was speaking a foreign language. I had no idea what she was talking about. But over about a 5 or 6 week period, she was like, do you have ideas of things that you really want to shoot, like sitting in an idea folder somewhere? And I was like, yeah. She goes, okay, you're going to call modeling agencies. You're going to get kids. You're going to do these 4 shoots. We're going to get this book printed by this day. And you're going to go do this thing. And I thought she was crazy. Like, every day for about 3 days, she's like, have you called modeling agencies yet? Have you called? And I'm like, I don't know what to say. What do I say when I call? Like, I literally don't have the words. I'm such an imposter. I don't know what it is. And so I ended up getting together with her and I had her do like a mock call, and I just recorded her. And then I came home, I made a script. I then picked up the phone, dialed the number, and then, you wait like 2 rings and then you hang up. I still did that a few times. And then I eventually called 3 different modeling agencies, and lo and behold, they sent me kids. They sent me kids to photograph. It was amazing. And I did 1, 2, 3, 4 shoots, 5 shoots. One was 2 sisters. One was a group of 4 kids, and the others were all singles. And then my friend tour, she came over and she helped kind of pick out the images and put a book together. We printed the book, and I went off to Palm Springs Photo Festival to meet with editors and agencies. And again, I had no idea what I was doing, no idea the questions to ask, but it was just the act of like, okay, so this is how I get in front of the people that would hire me to like be in a magazine. These are the people that would hire me to shoot that campaign. And that was a mind-blowing experience because I was seeing all these other photographers, some fine art photographers. I went to Art Streiber. I went to his class, and he is a prolific editorial entertainment photographer. For those that don't know him, I highly recommend looking him up. He was like a fire hose of information. And it was so much information. I've actually taken his class a total of 3 times now because I still can't get it all. And he doesn't allow you to record it, and he doesn't do any replays. So like, the only time you're going to get it is when you're there live listening. That was the entry point into turning the corner into like, well, what do I actually want to focus on? And if a job came calling, what do I want them to call me for? Mm-hmm. And it was like, I want to photograph kids. And then I went and I took a workshop out in Denver. I had no snow stuff because it wasn't snowing in California. So I took a workshop out in Denver, actually near Breckenridge. And the guy brought in models. So he had like 2 teenagers. We had like a family, like a mom and dad with 3 little boys. We had a stylist come out there. And there was I think about 7 or 8 photographers. And he invited down a creative director to come and hang out with us for one day. And it was a 3-day workshop. And the creative director comes down and he looks at your work. He gives you some feedback. And then he actually stayed with us for the day that we shot some of the models. And he would work with each photographer for about 20 to 30 minutes. That was super fascinating. One, just to kind of see how he would help art direct you or see where you were going with the story or help you push the story further. And more than anything was he spent the night with us at the cabin, and turned out him and I were reading the same book. And we were both very jazzed over this book. It's called How to Fascinate by Sally Hogshead, for those that are interested. And it's one of these like kind of personalities, but instead of how you see the world, it's how the world sees you. And he had just taken the quiz, if you will, to figure out his archetype. And I had taken the quiz, and it turned out we were twin archetypes. And so we were nerding out about all of this stuff. And he's like, hey, you said you're going to be in Denver for a few extra days. You should come by the ad agency. So he worked at Integer, which is one of the largest ad agencies on the west of the Mississippi. And I went in and I met him and I showed him my book, and he introduced me to about 4 of his colleagues, and I got to meet them. And again, this is super early on. I had no idea what I was doing other than just showing up and trying to create relationships and have conversations. And about a week after that, he had called me. We started chatting about some other stuff. And he's like, do you shoot food? And I said, funny enough, I just put up a food gallery. So that friend tour that I was talking about, she was a commercial photographer. She was shooting food, and she was wanting to become a food stylist. She wanted to stop photographing her food, and she wanted someone else to photograph her food. So I would go over and I would photograph her food. And through that experience, I built a food portfolio. And I used to work at a farmer's market part-time in those days that I was part-time at the bank. I would spend one morning working at a farmer's market, and I would photograph for the different farmers and for the stand that I also worked for. So I had some other food stuff related. And so through that portfolio, I got my first ever come bid this job. And I was up against some pretty heavy hitters. One guy that I really admired. I still admire him to this day. He's an amazing photographer out of New York, and he was repped. And I was like, who am I to go up against Chris? He's amazing. But I won the job, and I had to write my first treatment. Had no idea what that was. He's like, can you put a treatment together? I'm like, sure. What's a treatment? And he said, I will send you an example of what a treatment is. And then I called some photographers that I had started to get to know in the commercial world to ask advice of what do I put in a treatment? And how do I explain this? And what is the layout? And I really don't know. And I was very lucky that this creative director basically really liked me, took a liking to what I was doing, was willing to help the very green photographer put the stuff together. And I landed the job. It was for Miller Coors, and it was for a billboard ad in Louisiana and for end of market aisle caps. So it was a pretty awesome first job out of the gate type of thing that I have yet to replicate to this day. But yeah, it was kind of serendipitous that I had just happened to have a food gallery.
Yeah. Well, the thing I'm also hearing, and you've kind of, you said this in and amongst things, but relationships really do matter. The connection points that you have with people. And sometimes as a creative person, especially because usually when you're creating something, it's more of a solitary act. It's something where, you're in your head or you're doing your craft, and, maybe you're collaborating in some way, but by and large, there's a lot that happens where it's just you. And the temptation is to stay in that place where it's just you. But then the problem comes of, if it's just you, you don't see opportunity. You don't have serendipitous moments that happen because you're not out among people. You're not having conversations. You're not in places where maybe it doesn't seem connected to anything that you're actually pursuing, but you're somehow having conversation, you're being open. And then all of a sudden one thing may lead to another, and then opportunity comes because you're in the quote right place at the right time with the right person, right? So I think there's a lesson to be learned there as well, in just getting out and being among people and connecting and learning the art of conversation and just listening and being a good human, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to showing up and listening and being willing to offer whatever it is that you can offer, whether it's a piece of advice, whether it's a resource, whether it's your skill set. And that's something that I don't know, I just have done naturally over time. And a really kind of funny example of what you're saying is, so I moved to London. I knew nobody here. And I was like, okay, how do I meet people? British people in general are very polite. They're very nice, but it's really hard to get through the veil to get an offer to be like, hey, let's go grab a coffee or a pint, or, let's go do this thing together. And so I was like, okay, well, I like food. So maybe I'll go to supper clubs and I'll sit across from somebody. At least I can have a conversation. So I ended up going to a supper club, and this girl that sat across from me was there by herself as well. And we were geeking out over the fact that it was Donna Hay that we got to meet. So for those that don't know, Donna Hay is like the Martha Stewart of Australia. She has a very beautiful magazine that she did for many, many years. And she's just a lovely person. And we got to enjoy her amazing food from her like 7th or 8th cookbook. Anyway, we start chatting. Turns out she works at this university, and they're looking for people in interesting careers to come speak to their graduating business students, as well as their first years. So I got invited to go, and I was going to talk on the topic of networking and like, how do you network? And so I got up and I tell my little bit of story, and I could tell that half the room is like checked out. And so I just start doing like raise your hand if questions to kind of re-engage people, right? To look up front. And I start calling out people in the room like, hey, someone's got a Laker jersey on over there. I used to work for the Lakers, right? And then they like perk up and look over and move away from their phone. And so at the end of the talk, I mean, my whole talk was like 7 minutes. And there was 2 other people who also got up and talked. And those 2 other people I ended up networking with. One is a videographer, runs a company just south of where I live now. And the other one is a prototype product maker who actually needs pictures of the products that they make. And so it was great to meet those guys. But I all of a sudden quickly had a group of about 10 first years around me saying like, how do you make it so easy? How do you engage with people so easily? How did you do that? Like, I wasn't paying attention, but you made me pay attention. And I said, it's just, you got to just stick your hand out and say, hi, I'm Shelly. Who are you? What's your name? What do you do? What do you like? I said, to just be genuinely curious and in it just for the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were just like, wow.
It's funny because I recently moved to the Nashville area, and I grew up and stayed pretty much around the New York area my entire life. And the way that I grew up was such that, and my dad was a New York City detective as well. So there's built-in sense of like, you're in New York, you don't look anybody in the eye, you're riding the train, you're just, like everybody's to themselves, like don't bother anybody, don't engage with anybody. Just, the amount of people there, after a while, it's like, it's not people, it's like obstacles. It's just because you're trying to get to where you're going. So this whole thing built in of like, very much like you don't engage, you don't talk to strangers, like stranger danger is,
Don't look them in the eye, look away.
Exactly. So, but then coming here, having lived in that type of environment, really my whole life, it was this very disorienting type of thing because people want to chat. They want to take their time, and they want to look you in the eye and say, hey, like what's happening? And so it's been good for me to learn to adapt more to my surroundings here, where I'm like it's not like they're trying to, do something and harm you or,
No, they just want to talk.
Right, exactly. And it's those conversations. It's those small things of like, "Hey, I really like your shirt," or like, "Oh, those are cool glasses," or whatever. Like I've had more conversations around that sometimes do turn into, "Hey, by the way, like we're talking and you say you're an artist and oh, I've got this gallery or I have this friend who's, so and so." And it's like all of a sudden something that was hidden becomes visible because you engaged in this conversation. And so that is something to learn and to adapt to if that's not something that comes naturally. And even saying like, well, I'm an introvert, like that's not an excuse. You have to figure out a way to push past if you want to grow and also experience some things that you have not experienced yet. You got to do some different things. So I think it's a good challenge. So if anybody's listening right now and they're thinking, I don't know, like I'm feeling queasy just even listening to like trying to engage with somebody at that level, push yourself today. Go out and do something that is out of your comfort zone and engage. See what happens, right?
Yeah, I think to your point, it could just be as simple as paying somebody a compliment, right? I think when we first talked, I mentioned your glasses too. I was like, oh man,
Yeah.
you got cool glasses, right? And it could be as simple as that. I do it. I'm the outlier here in London when I'm on the underground and I see someone with a cool bag or shoes or There was a girl sitting next to me that had the cutest dog. Oh my God. And the dog was super mellow. His dog sitting on her lap. And I couldn't help it after like one stop. I'm like, that is the cutest dog. And she's like, I know, right? And then we ended up having this whole conversation for whatever, 5 or 6 stops. And it turns out she's a musician. She was going to LA. She was going to do some songwriting. She was going to play at some club it's like not far from my brother's house. So I was like, oh man, where's the info? Like, I'll send it to all my friends in LA. And then it turned out 2 of my friends could go and they went to her show. That's 2 more paying, tickets that she sold because we had this chat on the train.
Yeah. Yeah. You just don't know what may happen and what may be lying right below the surface, but having the chance to actually engage opens that up. One of the things I know that you talked about with me offline was this idea of, because you've moved around a bunch of places, being able to move someplace and not immediately have to feel like you have it all figured out and everything has a flow and a routine and here's what it's going to look like immediately. Like, can you talk a little bit about your experience with that?
Sure. So my first home, we'll say after college, was I moved to the Bay Area. I moved to San Francisco Bay Area. And my husband and I lived there on and off for 20 years. So we moved up there in 2001 and we were there for about 7 years. And I was working in sports at the time. So I worked at USA Rugby and then I worked at UCSF. And then in between there, I worked at Title IX and then I worked at Citibank and I was a financial analyst at Citibank. And then we moved for him to work on a film to Vancouver that I mentioned before. And we were there for a year. And I had to give up my job and couldn't work or go to school. So that's when I got back into photography and writing and things like that. And then his movie imploded. We moved back to the Bay Area. And I had this nice realization that, I could start a business, right? So that's when I opened the business. But then in 2012, he had an opportunity to go to DreamWorks Animation. So we moved back to LA. And I thought, oh, well, I grew up in LA. This is my home turf. This should be really easy. And it ended up being really hard. And I had to reestablish a business there. I had to build new contacts there. I did have my bank job while I was there for a bit, but I did end up leaving my bank job and going full time into my creative, the photo business and then coaching when we were down there. But it was when we moved back to the Bay Area, I was like, oh, I have to have a whole new focus. So in 2014, we moved back to the Bay Area. And it was kind of stepping into something I had just hit pause on. And that was kind of nice because it was I got to, in a way, pick up where I had left off, even though I'd closed the studio that I had worked at. But I got to just continue to build those relationships. And then the big move, which happened in 22. So March of 22, my husband gets a job at a studio here in London. And I knew that was happening for probably about 6 months. I knew we were moving over here. And I was running a group mentor program, a mentorship for food photographers specifically at the time. And I had a woman who lived in the UK who was in my group. And she was giving me a whole bunch of insights as to what to expect when I come over here, and that people don't get paid as much money and building connections can be a lot harder. And you really need an agent to help open doors. And I don't know, there was a lot of preconceived things. And I was like, do I want to hit the gas when I get there? One, I have this lingering notion of what happened when we moved to Canada. It was supposed to be 3 years to build this movie, and it all imploded within about 10 months of us being there, and we had to get out. So I was like, oh my God, I don't want to get to London and put my foot on the gas only to then have to relocate back to the States, right? So there's that in the back of my mind. I'm also not in my 20s so the gas in the tank has to last a little bit longer because you just don't have the same energy. I hate saying that, but you just don't. So when I landed here, I pretty much decided that first year that I was going to take my time to really work on the transition and not pressure myself so much to be get in the flow of things. Where do I want to meet people first? What are the types of people I want to meet while still maintaining my whole client roster in California? So sadly for the environment, good for me, I was flying back about every 6 to 7 weeks for client work. But I quickly realized after that first year that I really wasn't spending a whole lot of time in London. And I decided I wanted to meet people in production. So I wanted to specifically meet producers and production house because I figured I could be a PA I could be a production coordinator. I could shoot stills on like a video set, and I could find other ways to get involved in like the photo video world without actually being the photographer, to kind of get a glimpse into what's really going on without having to create my own business and, build the house from scratch all over again. So I was lucky enough to have an art director I know from San Francisco be invited to this conference here, and I got to be her plus one. And I went around and I met all the production people at that event and really leaned into like meeting them up for coffee, traveling down to the seaside where they are. So they're in Brighton, about an hour and a half train ride away. So I went down there a couple times to meet them. There was a couple producers I met, and then I started meeting some photographers, and then I got invited to an Adobe event and I met some more photographers. And I quickly learned like, yes, there is a lot of obstacles that I have to get over from my preconceived or lived experience in the States. So like my day rate that I get in the States, I'm not going to make in London. I'm going to make about a third of that, right? And so how do I feel about that? And can you shift that mental notion of I can make X amount of dollars over there, but I can only make Y amount of dollars over here for the most part. Now, that's definitely like a moving target. But just to know, like, I mean, for simple math, let's say it's $3,000 in California, but it's 1,000 pounds here. Like, is that worth the effort? Should I just keep marketing in the States? So there's a lot of that kind of conversation going on in my head. And then I start to meet more photographers saying like, oh, well, maybe I just take on smaller clients. Maybe I just look for retainer clients. Maybe I really lean into the things that I want to do more of. Like, I want to work more with B Corp organizations because they're really looking at their supply chain. They're really dialed into the environment. They really care about the sustainability aspect of things. And I really love startup. I think it's really cool. I love seeing when people grow, and if you can get in, maybe not super ground floor, but when they're ready to spend money on like the marketing side of things, then you can grow with them and you can see that brand expand, and then you get to expand with them. Can be really cool. And I have now the opportunity to do that, where before it was like, I have to hit a certain dollar number. Now I'm in a place where I don't have to hit a certain dollar number. I can pause and be like, okay, I've built a really great business. I have a cushion of business savings. I also am lucky to have a husband who can support me. I know not everybody is as lucky as that, but so I've actually spent now the time to figure out like, oh, there is this Built by Women's group, and it's all products built by women. It's all women founders. And like, I would say over 50% of them are B Corp. So I'm like, well, that's great. So I'm going to go to those meetings. And there's a Virgin, like Virgin Atlantic. Sir Richard has Virgin Startup here. And so I can get into like the startup world and see what's going on in the startup world. And so I'm kind of doing that exercise of what do I like and what do I maybe want to lean into more all over again. Like what I did 12 years ago, I'm doing it all over again now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the thing though, is the creative journey is an ever evolving and sometimes revisiting things from the past with slightly new contexts also. But that openness, I think, continues to serve, and the adaptability certainly, and the relationships, all the things that you've talked about. It's all parts of the puzzle that come together. And when we're in the moment of something, it's always like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to come together. I don't know what, it's the big mystery. But looking back a lot of times, that's where we see traces of, well, yeah, like I was in a similar situation or mindset or whatever, 10 years ago, and here's what happened here. And we learn as we look backwards also. And sometimes we can draw some comfort and some, just some courage for the next steps that we need for today. It's that kind of thing. We're at the top of our time, believe it or not, already. I mean, I feel like we could dive into all sorts of, topics even from here. I do want to ask one thing of, through all this stuff, is there something, maybe a piece of advice or something you learned that you would love to pass on to the people who are listening right now, who maybe they're in the midst of, I don't know, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm asking the questions. What is maybe some guiding principle or piece of advice that you return to that you'd like to maybe pass on to others today?
Oh, well, I think there's a couple things. Being that I come from finance, I would say one is like, know your finances. Don't be scared to look at your dollars and cents that are in your bank account, because that's really going to help you be able to price your work as a creative. And pricing is very personal. So even though when you look in the market, like I was talking about 3,000 or 1,000 or whatever, it's like, well, that money may not make sense for you. Your circumstance may be drastically different than mine. And so you need to know that in order to price your work. Two, I would say it takes time. This is not an instant gratification business. And in that vein of it takes time, people need to know that you are here and available and open to work. So that means you need to show up. And you need to constantly show up. You need to say, I'm here. I do this work. Let me show you my work. And there's, 18 different variations to show how you do that. You could show your finished pieces. You could show the process in which you do, but you've got to show that. And I mean, now we have more tools than ever to show how we do that. So pick one of those platforms and really lean in. And so whether that's, Instagram or LinkedIn or TikTok or YouTube or podcasting, but whatever it is, like show up there and keep showing your work, keep showing up. I know it's really hard. Look, I'm in a dark period right now of like reinventing myself. And so I know today I'm like, yeah, so what am I going to put out there that shows that I'm still here? I'm still working. I'm still figuring it out. So I would say, yeah, those are my different pieces. Is it takes time, know your finances and show up.
Nice. Yes. And so if people are interested in learning more about you or they want to work with you, like lay some links on us and some places and some things.
Sure. So if you want to see my work, you can find me at shellywaldman.com. It's just my whole name. And you can find me on Instagram at Shutter Shelly. That's like a camera shutter, Shelly. That's where you'll find my photography work. If you want to know more about my education stuff or work with me as like a business coach, you can find me over at creativecamp.pro. And that's creativecamp.pro, the website, and creativecamp.pro on Instagram. I also have a podcast too, which you can listen to creative stories over there and get to know me a little bit more through those. That's Creative Campfire and all places that you listen to podcasts. And then I have an experience coming to London at the end of September. If you're interested in the full pass, you can come for all 4.5 days. It's September 28th to October 2nd. But if you don't have that amount of time and you only want to come for one day, single tickets are now available for Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of that week. We're going to be doing a creative activity, and then we will dive into the depths of business and have really good business discussions. And then coming in October, I have a pitching workshop coming. So if you want to know more about that, you could get on the camp bulletin over at creativecamp.pro.
Awesome. And I highly encourage everyone to, especially when people have podcasts, you're listening to a podcast or watching a podcast now, what's one more, right? Especially if it's creativity based and you're looking to expand just more voices to surround you in this season. I highly recommend go queue it up. You won't regret it. So
yeah, for
Shelly,
sure.
Thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate you willing to share your journey, your experiences, your insights, all the things. It's been a pleasure to have you on today.
Well, thanks so much, Mike. This has been really fun. I've got to pull out some stories I haven't told in a while.
And that's always good. Thanks for listening today. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a rating and a review. It really helps this podcast be seen and heard by others.